Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 26 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this episode, we are going to prepare the factory for Antimony Oxide, and then see how well our giant setup works. Enjoy. Making oxygen should probably be done around where we're making the sodium hydroxide, just because they share hydrogen as an output, and it kind of makes sense. So it'll just be something like this, and for now, let's just do the exact amount we need, which is 16, even though in the near future, we're going to need a lot more oxygen than this. Well, are you ready to see an incredible amount of electricity be consumed in one tiny area? 155 megawatts for this. Here we go. So boom, it's being placed in there. And wow, well, first of all, that is incredible. But also, we're almost maxing out our factory here, which means all of the power plants that we unhooked need to be hooked back in. And that is why I left them there, because I wasn't sure if we would actually need them or not. So we still need to figure out where the coal's going to come from, because we've used that coal for other things. But nonetheless, the power plants are still there and waiting for fuel. But yep, level is going up. Unfortunately, we probably need to deal with the power plants now, because if we hook up antimony, it's only going to consume even more power. So we do need to do something about this. We need to have 4 input belts for this power plant, and then we're going to need 10 for all of these. So a total of 14 belts are going to need to come in, and I guess it's going to be here. Man, that's going to be incredible, the amount of fuel that's going to be moving around. So some of these plants can just straight up be turned on because they're just sitting here, but we now need to produce an additional 14 belts. And this might actually not be enough. We might need an additional coal patch. I don't really feel like doing that right now, which is Marsh speak for however many miners we get on here is the amount that we're going to use. So I really don't think we need to build another mine for coal, because we are getting very close to being able to produce power in a much more efficient way than raw coal. We basically need oil burners, so I'm fine with saying this is enough power, and if it's not enough, we'll just shut things down and bide our time. I expect all of these belts are going to be relatively temporary. It's a lot of belts, but I'm thinking it'll be faster just to move belts around the factory rather than build new power plants. We probably want to come up here above Circus, just because this is an empty space and it'll be easy to pull them out later. There is something satisfying about filling up those power plants again. Having them sit there empty was a little sad, even though they're an old-fashioned design. Nonetheless, if something's built, I'd like to see it connected. Okay, it's all hooked up. How many belts did we end up with? 15, 16, 17. So we actually have enough. Amazing. How's power doing now? Well, it's better because the electrolyzers are turning off, so... But that means we're going to need to have 6 more belts coming in there, and... It's crazy, yes, but also... There's something satisfying about seeing the scale of all of this just expand. We've got our 14 belts now, as straight as we can expect them to be. And too bad we don't have robots for this. But we can still use the Ghost Planner to help us out a little bit. So at least we know how big it's going to be. This is so crazy. This is why you consume things on site, instead of belting them around the factory like this. But I just really want to make use of the existing power plants. It's not so much the building of the plants, but the fact that they have their ash outputs connected with other parts of the factory. That is the part that I don't want to deal with, because it all works very well right now, and I don't want to change that. I wonder what the UPS impact is of all these belts. It can't be great. Well, it's fine when they're full. But if they're not full, it might be a problem. But when we were doing the antimony build, we saw what the power output would be to run that, so this was part of the plan. We knew what we were getting into. But luckily, placing long belts is not mechanically complicated. You just hold mouse 1 and go for a run. Now, talk about a series of belts that's going to be satisfying to remove later. Definitely these. It's also incredibly time consuming, because it's much slower to pick them up than place them, so I don't know, maybe I'll just leave them. Until we have robots to pick them up for us, because otherwise it's going to take a long time to pick all these up. Now be honest with me, have you ever seen a factory with this many belts of coal right next to each other and just going all over the place? I certainly haven't, because that is a lot. Like, an unfathomable amount of coal. Of course, it's on yellow belts and they're not stacked or anything, so I'm sure that there are many factories that do use this much in Space Age Factorio, but I've certainly never made one. Okay, that's the majority of the belts. So let's check all of these lines to show where they all go. So that first one is there, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and number 10. So let's hook all this up and see it populate. Whoops. At least it's not making the belt dirty by doing that. Of course, power draw is very low right now. I'm glad I left all this in place, because all of this belt work is waiting and ready to receive resources. But yeah, it all made it. Now we've got the final 4 belts, and do they just go straight down? Well, it certainly wouldn't be in the way of anything. Okay, and the final 4 belts. Nothing crazy about these. They just go in as required. And it looks like with all of these, we're basically going to have a gigawatt of power now. My personal opinion is that you reach mega factory levels once you have a gigawatt of power. And I should say power consumption, so production doesn't really count. But I have the feeling we're going to be able to use that up really fast. Okay, this seems to be working as well as we can test it. We won't really know for sure until we've got the full setup going. But for now, we need to prepare for the next part of it. And there's kind of 2 components of it. One is we need to get the coke over here, which is pretty easy, and the other is we need to deal with the liquid fuels. We calculated for coke oven gas, but we're actually going to want to mix in many different types of fluids. And I've actually been thinking about this for a while now. Our janky tank here for mixing fluids, it kinda works, but the more fluids we add to it, the more janky it's going to be. The main difficulty is when the output pipe is mostly empty. The new fluid can't go in until the pipe is completely empty. So if you have something that's being produced consistently enough, it can essentially be fumes inside the pipe, but it's monopolizing that pipe and not letting anything go in there. So the fix for this is basically an SR latch or something like that, where it turns off and on intervals, rather than circuit logic like this where it turns on and off instantly. We have the circuit network now, but we don't have combinators. So what's a way we can do this without combinators? And I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I came up with a solution that might be a little crazy, but it also might work. And we're going to do it with caravans. So let's make 2 outposts. And these are actually kind of expensive to make when you're not carrying the tanks around. So imagine that the input pipe is coming in there. And to start, we'll do the syngas, even though we have none of it right now, because we're using it to make plastic. I set up a caravan outpost here to prepare for the fact that we're going to need a ton of plastic soon. And unfortunately, you can't flip the caravan outpost, but all it is 2 caravan outposts where fluid goes in one side and then fluid goes out the other. And then we're going to need a fluid caravan for this. We're actually going to need a few of them, so let's just grab a few. So this is going to function as a bit of a latch, because the caravan will wait at the first outpost until it has a full load of fuel, and then it'll just walk to the second one. That'll cause this to turn on and off at intervals. If the tanks are super full, as they are over here, it'll essentially be instant. And that's fine. We don't really care about what happens if the tanks are super full. We want to prepare for if the tanks are empty, because we built this power plant setup to provide coke oven gas when the factory has no other forms of liquid fuel. So when the first fluid outpost gets low, the caravan is just going to wait until it fills up, which will cause the other outpost to empty, and then the tank will fully clear, the pipes will fully clear, and then something else can take its place. And there's an additional thing we need in here, because this is going to use caravan actions, so we need somewhere for them to get more food. And we could deliver food by caravan to this, but the rate is going to be so slow, plus I don't want to have a caravan just for that it makes sense to just use this one and send essentially the jerky over here. So we're going to limit this to 1 stack because that's all we care about. And it's an annoying belt. And who knows how much jerky we're going to need. 4 is probably way too many, but I also just want the belt to be full, so... Okay, we need to fill this up, and we're going to do so with the same logic as before, that if it's above 10%, the rest can be dumped. So there's not going to be much to see here. First he has to store food, and then it's simply fill self fluid, empty self fluid. And the setting that is making this function as a latch is this wait until fulfilled. If you don't do that, it's just going to bounce back and forth between the two. But now we can actually kind of see this in effect. And you see that now it is just waiting. So this is causing the effect we want. And we probably want to have a fuel pipe on the bottom here and replace that other one, because it is going all throughout the factory, and all of the places that we're going to be delivering fuel from is actually on the bottom of this. So it kind of makes sense to send it along this instead. So we'll put a pump on the other side of this setup, because if it's already made it to this tank, it is counted as a fluid that we want to burn. So it just gets sent on the combined fluid pipe. And there is another aspect of this we need to think about, and that is priority between the different setups. This one is the highest priority, and we can determine that simply by looking at the quantity of fuel that it's going to produce and the value of it. Higher quantity, lower value fuels are a higher priority to burn because they are more difficult to store. And since this is going to generate 600 of essentially poor fuel, then that is something we want to burn first. Right now it's not running very much because we're not using very much tar for things, but we are about to use a ton of this coke, and all of this is about to fire up. So I am going to use a Factorio radar just to mark that this is something that is transmitting a signal. This is going to be a relatively temporary measure that later on we're actually going to read the value of the tanks directly and not do this crazy Caravan stuff. So that's going to send the signal. There is no signal. And now we have a kind of copyable pattern. So let's go to the next lowest value fluid. And looking at everything we make, probably the next one would be the condensates, because we're making 125 a second, and it has a pretty low value to it. And it's generally the tank that's always full. So the reason why I'm setting up this automated system is because once we get going, all of these tanks are going to be filling up very rapidly, and like every few minutes I'm going to have to constantly switch tanks on, switch tanks off, and it's going to get really frustrating. So I am trying to create an automated system so it will just happen. And we could do an overflow in here, but honestly, because we need none of this whatsoever for any process, we could actually just directly pump the fluid in. And kerosene is the same way. So you can see that this has already filled up the condensates to maximum, and the same for kerosene. So we're going to put an overflow in here, and it'll be relatively low, 10%. But we're not quite at the point where we can put this in a smaller tank yet, because we still produce it at large quantities and we can't burn it away right now. Okay, right now there's no signals on this wire because there's no fluids in there, but there's also one other thing to consider. It's not much of a problem right now, but we do occasionally vent carbon dioxide. And when we were working on moondrops, I mentioned that it's not really worth making methane for power because making carbon dioxide is kind of expensive. However, if the carbon dioxide is free and we don't need to consider it, then what would it be? Well, I created a sample build here. It's actually reasonably large. It uses one nursery and then 22.5 greenhouses. And we don't have to calculate for the carbon dioxide because that's coming in for free. The only thing we need to concern ourselves with is the 0.56 of the moondrops. And doing that in this setup is a little difficult, but we can come here to see that that is about 1/10 of what our output is, and it costs about 25 megawatts to do that, not including the ore. And we probably should include this ore because it is electrically mined, even though it's not much. So it would be about 3 megawatts to produce the moondrops for this, in addition to, let's say, 11 for the setup to run. So that would be 14 megawatts. And then how much power would it make? So methane is 0.8 megajoules, and we would have 60 of them. So this would make 48 megawatts, and it would consume, about 14 or so, which means this is absolutely a positive generation, and this can be used in our mixed fuel pipe. So we actually have a little setup to do. Although right now it's not really going to run because carbon dioxide is actually reasonably high, but at least we won't have to vent it anymore. So we need, let's just do 22 of them. I just chose this number simply because it's the limit of one nursery. Not necessarily we would need to produce this much carbon dioxide, but at least we would no longer have to vent the carbon dioxide. We would actually be able to do something with it. And I try to keep some extra machines here. Specifically, I put the alien life machines in chests because many times those machines don't go into anything else. So I so happen to have a nursery waiting for us there. And I believe, since we have disconnected all the fuel pipes, that everything is actually going to be more or less empty. Although it looks like condensates is still connected. I almost want to disconnect it because although it'll cause the factory to come to a standstill, then when we actually hook all this up, there'll actually be a need for the fluid and we will see it operate. And we can seed the system and get it going. So there we go. Consuming our carbon dioxide and making the methane. Okay, now we need the common fuel pipe. After it has gone through our little latch here, it will get to this other side. However, whether or not we actually want it to run kind of depends. One thing we can do is actually create a pump snake. It's kind of a funny term to use, but looking at all of the things we want to consume, it's probably the methane that's the highest priority simply because we can store the least of it. However, it is still a lower priority than our syngas here, that we're actually reading the fluid that has made it past the latch and is ready to be put on the pipes. So if we have syngas that's ready for pipes, then it means that essentially nothing else should run. So we can do that with this pump. And right now there are no signals there, but basically we have to say that syngas is equal to 0. There cannot be a syngas signal. If not, the pump turns on, and it has turned on. The next lowest priority is the condensates here. We have two conditions, or in other words, an and condition for these pumps to go. So we'll put a second pump in here and have them read both signals, where it can only run if there's no syngas and also if there's no methane. And if both of those are true, it will pump. And it does want to. And we're just gonna go down the line here. The last burnable fuel we need to concern ourselves with is actually our coke oven gas build here. So we have one more item on the end of the pump snake. The kerosene caravan has to be empty, and if so, that can run. The way this works is we just put our fluid caravan in, and it could be anywhere, but he'll automatically go to where he needs to. Fill self fluid, empty self fluid. So let's see it work now that there's fluid in there. And yep, the oven gas is being sent because all of the other tanks are empty right now. But now that tank's fluid is on the network. And the caravan is just going to chill out there now. He's really not going to walk anywhere. He's just going to stay right here. And you can see that the tank is low and filling up, but it's not causing fluctuations on this tank because the caravan actually has to get completely full first before he transfers over, which is what we want to see. All of the latches should be ready to go, and we have all of these signals showing which builds can run and which ones won't. And we do have some coke oven gas in the system already, but it's time to see if it works. If all the logic is correct, there should be priority, and it might happen too fast to see what happens, but we should see all of these signals start to disappear and it prioritize things. Based on our fluids, we're going to want it to consume all of the condensates first, so ideally it will keep going. And we need to slide the pipe in, but consumption is occurring. The level is going down, and it's actually going down pretty slow to show you basically how much fuel is in coke oven gas, so it's a lot. That's why we built that setup, because it was substantial, and everything should start firing up now, but it's also like completely full of coke oven gas, so it might take a second. While we're here, we could also set up our shale, because running shale does produce a ton of stone, a full belt of it, and we can actually only run it so fast, and our Antimony setup here also produces a bunch of stone, so we don't really want them to overlap and fight. So ideally, we wouldn't be running shale all of the time. And really, based on our calculations, the amount of fuel that shale makes, it's actually not that much compared to stone. So, you know, if we can, sure, but if it's getting in the way, no. And looking at all the things that it makes, right now, the only thing that shale makes that we actually want is aromatics, which means we can control the setup based on that. So a couple pumps might fight for this because of the order that we hooked everything up. Ideally, we'll see something take over. It doesn't really matter what. We just want the pipe to be empty. And there we go. We had a splash of gasoline that needed to go in there, and it's gone. And then condensates take over, and that's exactly what we would want to see. And now this caravan is just going to be going back and forth between these 2 points, basically as long as condensates is available. And I'm sure it can make this tiny little transfer faster than our factory is going to be consuming it. So if it's less than 100,000, it can go. Of course, we actually need to have the radar here. And there we go. That will clear up some stone. And right now there's still a bunch of coke oven gas in all of the pipes. And it's kind of funny how the coke oven gas clears out and then the gasoline takes its place. So it's gurgling along, but setting it up in this way allows it to move cleaner than having like drops of fuel go through. So we're just going to have to let it run for a while to see how it actually works. But at least on the surface, it seems to be good. We're going to have 2 very big belts of coke going around the factory. And we need all 30 of it. Oh, empty mine. Just for this process. And now suddenly this setup is going to run a lot. But it's not really going to create us that much extra liquid fuel. We'll come down and off to the side so we're out of the way as much as we can be. Just 30 coke a second is far too much to expect caravans to move around. You always think you have so much space between your builds, and then you find out you actually don't. And we'll try to keep this as clean as possible. There's a lot of belts going on in here, but just doing what I can. So there we go. All of the fuel should make it here now. So it's interesting that one of the condensates pumps turned off, and now the level is starting to go down a little. Because we actually have some methane now. So coming over here, yep, the methane tank has been filled up, which means it will eventually make it into the pipe. Okay, we need to smelt all of this, and it's going to take 30 blast furnaces. And how do we want to split this up? Well, it depends if we want to combine things on belts or not. We probably do, because it's going to be 3 inputs and 2 outputs, so that's a lot of belts. If we have 2 belts going in, then we could have 4 setups, and that would handle all of the items. And here's what the blast furnace looks like. It's a very dirty looking pie building. Power poles, unfortunately, don't reach all the way. And we'll do the outputs on the other side. This goes against how we did it in the earlier days where it was 1 input and 1 output on each belt. So how about we'll do plastic in and then the antimony out on this 1 belt. Put the power poles in the same spot. And then we'll need 1 more belt to get rid of the ash, and we're going to have exactly 1/2 belt of ash per line, so we'll be able to put it in here, and unfortunately it's kind of hard to see. It'll be something like that. Each one handles 1 per second, so if we want to do a total of 7.5, it means we're going to need 8 machines in total. And that's fine, I don't mind having more machines than are in the plan, if that means it'll be nice and clean. Okay, there's the 8. And we'll do the underground trick. Looks a little cursed, but I'll just have the 1 there so we can have our output. And the ash is going to keep going. We could actually put it all on the same belt, but that's okay. So we've got 1 line. We need a second one. Do we want any spaces in here? Probably. You never know when you're going to need more belts. And it's not going to cover up the oil sand there. So that's good. That's so much smelting. This is going to be crazy. But that's what my gut tells me with my previous experience with Pi, is that we're really going to want as much antimony oxide as we can possibly make. So this build was sized with my guesstimate for exactly what that number is, at least for our current factory. Considering we still don't have long-handed inserters, I think this build actually looks kinda decent. Soon. We're actually not that far away from having long-handed inserters, so only have to deal with this for, air quotes, a little longer. Because of course this is Pi and things always take longer than you expect them to. But despite us having splitters, still, we are doing very strange Pi things because of a lack of long-handed inserters. And almost done, we need 2 more, and I've been calling them blast furnaces, but they're actually basic oxygen furnaces, but I see these machines more like blast furnaces. Okay, well that is all of the stuff. We do need to kind of pipe things in, but we should probably take it a step further here and just make sure this whole process is complete. They do stack in 100, which is another point towards caravans, and most plate-like things do stack like that, so that'll be our output because we're going to want to test this for a while. And then hopefully if these are balanced, we should have our 4 half belts of ash. So we'll just pick this up and reuse it, and at this point there's not going to be anything here, so it doesn't really matter where we put this. It seems like so much ash and things, but this is coke and it's a lot more efficient, so we're actually getting a huge amount of energy off of a relatively small amount of fuel, at least volume-wise. I also don't mind using coke for this because we do need to kind of find an excuse to start up our tar processing, so using all of that coke for this makes a lot of sense. And there we go, that will handle 2 belts of ash. And now I guess I just need to get everything piped up and then we can see how it works. I see we've got some aromatics inside the fuel pipe. Does that mean we have used up all of the condensates? Or at least almost all of it, to the point to where the priority switched? Yep, that's the case. That now the tank is empty and the Caravan is functioning as a buffer, and it will not transfer the fluids until it's actually full of fluids, which has emptied this pipe and allowed aromatics to take its place. I do really like having all these belts and pipes right next to each other in a straight line. Just makes the factory look way more organized, and this is starting to become a problem because we cannot reach that inserter in the middle. I'm thinking this is going to be a good test of our factory when we run this whole build and all of the associated things, but also the production rate is probably going to be high enough to where it's really only going to run for a few minutes and then it's going to shut down again. So I don't know how much testing is actually going to happen. I mean, that's a good thing, but it's also kind of funny. Okay, I think that's everything we need. So let's start pumping everything in. Of course, first the oxygen just goes through every machine and dumps in. And our plastic has arrived via Caravan. So it goes on the inside of this closer belt. We'll let them all populate. And then this right here is delivering all of our resources. So, and it looks like I got these slightly mixed up. Always check, because it's a lot of junk to pick up if you're wrong. So there we go, these 2 delivered to the first setup on each side, and these other 2 delivered to the second one. But let's see everything mixed together. These do need to be full belts of half and half. And those electro lasers when they kick on. Hoo boy. Okay, we should be ready to go to see how all this works. So we'll connect the 4 belts and see this go. It's kind of a funny building, but it very briefly ran, which seems wrong, but it looks like it was just filling up a buffer. And there it is. It's very power hungry. You see, even though this is coke, how quickly it runs through it. So these inserters are barely enough. It's a very smoky building too. I like the sound of it, but also it's kind of a scratchy sound. But all of the ash then makes it over here, and it looks like some of these inserters are the wrong way. Very, very smoky in here. But it's all going very rapidly, filling up on our antimony oxide, and now we should see pretty much the entire factory come to life. But taking a look at this, now that we can see it at full flow, it's looking pretty good. Most of these aren't supposed to be full belts, so we would expect there to be gaps, but gaps are fine. The main thing we're looking for is stuttering of belts, which implies that there are restrictions. And it seems to be rather smooth here. Like, it's actually kind of awesome. I don't know what I was expecting, but you have to be extremely careful with belts with a setup like this, of this scale that there could be a lot of hiccups if you aren't very particular. And there still might be some hiccups because these really are supposed to be full belts, but also this is the kind of thing that's so big that it takes a while for it to reach full power. It's also statistically based as well. Looking at some of these recipes, they do create known quantities, but then other ones create percentages. So it can vary a little bit. It's probably never going to be completely smooth, but it doesn't have to be. I'm just trying to use up as much of our factory's output as we can, just to say we did our best, and ultimately at the end, that's all you can do. And by doing our best, I mean our factory's best, getting the most out of our factory that we reasonably can. And man, that level's going down fast. And power? Well, it's not too bad. I think this setup actually wasn't that bad with electricity. It was electrolyzers that consumed a lot of power, but the main issue is actually the liquid fuel. The actual electricity wasn't that much of a concern. And aromatics about to disappear, and it does, so it's not on the list anymore. And I believe the next one is now gasoline. And looking at these pumps, they are all engaged, so they're just waiting for the pipe to be empty. And when it is, now we're using gasoline. So the priority seems to be working. And power? Well, I mean, that's basically a steady state. I can't really see it getting any higher than that. And it's electrolyzers, essentially. And we're keeping up with the soot and things, but this is also the kind of thing that our factory is so big, it's probably going to take straight up minutes for all of the factory soot to actually make it down there to see if everything is fast enough. And almost 1.5k. I can pretty much guarantee your first factory in Pi did not produce antimony this fast. I feel good about this though. I don't think we're going to have a shortage of antimony oxide for hundreds of hours. So I am very pleased with this. Of course I say that and then I'll find a way of using it all. But no, this is good. This is really good. That this is within the capacity of what our factory can do without overloading it, and it gives us tons of options in the future. So I guess another question is, how are we handling all of this stone? Because it's a lot. Has it actually made it to the stone processing place yet? Yeah, it looks like it has. And we are actually splitting it across 2 belts, so that's good. Some of it is going to make our asphalt tiles, but we actually need to have some extra pitch for that. And then the extras just go into concrete. And about pitch, I had a overflow valve here, but we probably want it on the other side, because right now tar processing uses all available pitch for making our coke, and we actually don't want that. We want to leave some left over. So we should be seeing pitch pressurize, and it is. So now we are rapidly making asphalt tiles again, which is really helping consume all of that gravel. And yeah, it seems like our factory can handle all of this stone. I wasn't totally expecting that, but then again, we have shut down, for the most part, the shale production, although it is going now, but it's not going at full blast like it was. And gasoline is going down. So that is fantastic. I am very pleased with all of this. And yes, I did some tile placing to create a grid where the red tiles are where all of the underground pipes go, so they're all evenly jumped, and then the black tiles are where the horizontal versions of the pipes go, just to make it a little easier for me to place them. Also, not all of these are going properly, so we might want to go in there and just put some splitters in there and do it properly. And it sure seems like it'll fit in here. But this should turn out to be nice and smooth flow. Well, let's continue the research then. However, that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.